to everyone. Welcome to the Game for a Change session. I think we've probably got quite a few people joining us in the next couple of minutes, so I apologise if I repeat myself. But a little bit of housekeeping, as if any of you have joined the sessions, I'm so sorry that I keep saying this in every session, but if you just make sure your microphone is on mute, and if you have any questions, if you pop them in the chat with your name and organisation, we will talk through them at the end. But without further ado, as I think we're now just after 11 o'clock, I will hand over to Linda.
Thank you. Let's have a go at sharing my screen again. Hopefully it's as successful as last time. Okay, so I'm Linda Spurdle, and I'm going to talk about how Birmingham museums came to work with Occupy White Walls, which is a massive multiplayer online video game. And the first thing I need to say, I guess, is that we didn't set out to do this. There wasn't some great plan to join a game, to work with a game company or anything like that. This very much came about from a couple of things, which is one, a kind of open access story, which I'll touch on in a moment, and two, the fact that we were in a pandemic. I think that's really important to the decisions we made. But I thought I'd illustrate both things in a way by a couple of images here. There's Edward Burne-Jones, the artist, standing in front of the Star of Bethlehem, which was an artwork which was created especially for Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery. It's absolutely huge. I think it's been on the walls pretty much non-stop since the Second World War, because the story goes, when they did a bit of redevelopment work in that gallery, they made the doors too small to move the artwork out of, so that's why it's remained on the wall. So, you know, much loved artwork in Birmingham, but not an artwork that has travelled. Obviously, with open access, this means this artwork has been seen and shared by more people than ever before. But what I particularly love about the partnership with Occupy White Walls is this artwork is now on the walls of over 200 art galleries within this game. So it's broken out and is around the world. So yeah, just to touch on open access, I won't go into this too much because it's quite a big story in itself. But I think it was about 3 or 4 years ago now we decided to release our out of copyright images into the public domain. I know not a lot of art galleries in the UK have done this. There's lots and lots of different reasons. A couple that I'll just touch on included that our director at the time, Ellie McAdam, was really keen that academics should be able to use our images for free. She felt that by charging people, we were actually limiting knowledge of our collections. You know, people were choosing not to use our images, choosing not to research our images, and she thought that was obviously a very bad thing. When the art gallery, Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, opened in 1885, it was all around inspiring local artisans to create things, to build things. Based on, not based on, but as I said, inspired by what they saw in the art gallery. So it was that feeling that this was something that maybe we should be doing again around learning and creativity. And finally, we thought that BMAG was about to shut. Now, ironically, it has been shut, as you know, but not quite as we planned. But the idea was it was going to be shut for a redevelopment. So we were thinking, like, how can we keep the museum open in other means? So that was, again, another reason. So there's many reasons, but those are just a few of them. But we were quite aware that just saying, you know, you can use our images for free now was pretty meaningless. People have to be able to find the images, and also because they're so used to the restrictions, you have to kind of encourage people and let people know that you know they can use these images for whatever they want to do now. I promise you we will get to the games. Quickly moving through this. So we just experimented with a variety of different ways of getting kind of like the news out there that you could use these images. We had a digital asset management system, which we bought for internal reasons, but it has a function whereby you can put folders on to share them online. And this actually proved to be brilliant because people can just go in there and download those images themselves now. So people just self-service themselves, self-service, and go and get those images themselves. And what we didn't realize is it wasn't just individuals that would start to do this, but actually other organizations had to come to us to ask to basically they didn't just take the images, they come and said, can we partner with you? Can we take these images and use them and kind of use your kind of brand name? So Unsplash is an example of that. And that's been massively successful. You know, in the last year, 1 million people have downloaded the kind of 250 images or so we have on that website. So yeah, unexpected success there. But where we were still having problems were originally with getting people to realize they could do with whatever they wanted to with our images. And we start to run a series of remixes and hacks, which were great fun. But to be honest, nothing came from them. All that stayed in the room, you know, so it never went any further than that. So we come up with this idea of doing something bigger that people would find out about, might inspire them, which was the Cut Copy Remix project. Which, thanks to curator Emily Beddoes-Davis, included Cold War Steve, become, you know, very successful, well known, I guess, over the last year. But he's a Birmingham artist, which I hadn't realised, and we had a small budget, but thankfully he loves Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, been coming there from being a kid, brings his kids along, so he agreed to work with us. And we also worked with, we also commissioned an artist, Mixed Milk, Martin McNally, and we worked with the Black Hole Club, who work with emerging digital artists in the West Midlands. So it was a lovely project, and it should have ended with an exhibition last year. I think it should have been April or May last year, but because we weren't open, it turned into a digital project. Everybody who was involved in the project was incredibly generous. They allowed their artworks to be shared online, and in some cases also the process of what they were doing, they were sharing that online as well. So it really extended the life of the project, and a lot more people, I think, got to know about it. And here's an example of yes, one of the, I would kind of say one of more Cold War Steve's more typical approaches with Donald Trump, etc. In this, it's Last Summer Things Were Greener is the name of the artwork, which he's changed quite radically, I guess. And we also released Benny's Babbies, which is a celebration of Birmingham that he'd done, Cold War Steve had done, and this was like just incredibly popular. It was, I guess, it was a very bleak time, and it just got a lot of love. All these people who come from Birmingham, the humour within it, yeah, it just got a lot of love. And then the final one he did for us. These are all massive, by the way. They did eventually end up on display in the Birmingham Museum and Art Galleries with wonderful gold frames. Hopefully we can get them out again when we reopen. Yeah, so this is, I call it the paraphilites on the bus, and it's many of our famous paraphilite artworks on this Birmingham bus. And over on the left, you can see Cold War Steve has written a comment that he feels the Paraphilite Brotherhood would have said, which is a photo montage isn't art, so self-critical. So yeah, quickly rushing through this. This is the artwork that was created by Mixed Milk, which was a film of which combines lots of our artworks together. It's very beautiful, and that went on display at BMAG and at Vivid. And we also worked with Rosa Francesca from the Black Hole Club. And this is the link into the game. Well, there's two links into the game. There's the project itself, the Cut Copy Remix project, which was just such a lovely project to work on. It was great partnerships. I'm so generous with their time. Yeah, and we wanted to continue to work together. And Rosa is also an artist on, she plays on the Occupy White Wall games, but she's also an artist in Occupy White Walls. And so she came to me and she said, basically at the end of the project, have you heard of Occupy White Walls? Which I hadn't. And she said, well, I just think, you know, if you could put your artworks in this game, that would be another great way for people to use your artworks and discover your artworks, and you really should go and have a look. So I did. That's exactly what I did. I went off to have a look, and yeah, I was intrigued. You know, it wasn't quite what I expected because unfortunately I don't feel I can show a video on soon, but I'll share some links afterwards. It was beautiful. You know, these art galleries that I was seeing that people were creating were absolutely beautiful, and Rosa introduced me to Yarden, who's the director of Sticky Pixels, who's the guy behind Occupy White Walls. Yeah, he was great. He was, you know, I think the thing that came over straight away is that he really loves art, and he really wants people to discover art and to, you know, to be able to develop their own tastes. So it kind of fitted in really well with, you know, our own interests around open access and getting people to use art. So I'll tell you a little bit more about it. As I said, it's a massive multiplayer online video game, which means that lots of people are playing the game at the same time. There's lots of people within there. You can choose to talk to people or not. You know, it's not, you don't have to engage with people in any way. But within that game, you're building 3D art galleries. There's lots of components. And when you initially go in there, you're going to build something quite simple. But if you spend time on it, if you're a creative person, you can just get better and better. And they're very individual as well, because, you know, they're based on your taste and what you can imagine. And so people collect art and display art within these art galleries. So they create their own exhibitions. There's also artificial intelligence as part of the game called Daisy, and that suggests art based to you on your taste. So the idea is the more art you choose in the game, the better it gets to know what you like. And also there's no, what would you say, there's no hierarchy within the game. So it's not going to suggest something to you just because it's a very famous artwork. You know, it will also be suggesting artwork to you by, you know, relatively unknown artworks, for instance. It has an established user base of about 75,000 people. Now, that was quite exciting straight away, because it meant there was going to be a lot of users. This wasn't something we were going to have to start from scratch. You know, these were like actively engaged people who loved art. You know, what better community can there be for us, really? Like I said, it was a hive of creativity. And people also visited each other's art galleries. I think this is really important, because at a time last year when you weren't able to visit any art galleries within this world, you know, there's a different thing going on, people building and creating art galleries and visiting each other's art galleries. And I think the other thing worth saying about the game is that I think a lot of people attach a lot of meaning to the game. Obviously, they invest so much in what they build and what they curate. But I think there's more than that as well. I think last year, when everything was so bleak, there was something, I don't know, an example of this would be I was like, Yarden was showing me around some of the new features of the game at one point, and just walking around, we come across a memorial to somebody that somebody had built within the game. So that's what I mean about people actually putting some real meaning within that game. So why did we join? Well, as I said, it was a great game. I was really impressed. It wasn't something we were starting from scratch, you know, it wasn't something, oh, is this going to work? It was working, you know, so in a way it was a no-brainer, I felt, to jump into it. We didn't have to finance it, we didn't have to pay to join, and it was a relatively low bar in terms of what we had to do, which was to basically give them some images and metadata. It fitted with our open access policy. And, you know, we were excited also about reaching this new audience around the world, because this is a global game, you know. I mean, it's funny in some ways, because people are so interested in art. It kind of like, unlike Unsplash, where people are searching for keywords and some of the things that rise to the top, you're like, why on earth is that image popular? I hate to say that, but that's what I think. Why is that image popular? On this game, it kind of fits more with what, I guess, some of the more established things that we might know. For example, we know our paraphilites are incredibly popular in Japan. You know, there's always people, art galleries in Japan would always love to have our paraphilite artworks go and tour there, and that is reflected within the game. So people within Japan are using a lot of our paraphilite artworks. I thought that was really a nice kind of link up. But anyway, yes, it was getting great reviews as well. So anyway, it just seemed to me a no-brainer to join, but obviously had to persuade people. And I think, you know, this is the kind of pandemic situation, isn't the whole pivoting. I think just a year before, if Rosa had come to me at the end of the game and said, oh, I think perhaps you should, sorry, the end of Cut Copy Remix, and said, perhaps you should get involved in this game, I would have probably said, oh, but I've got to move on to the next thing now. I'm too busy. There's too many hurdles. But, you know, given the situation, it wasn't like that. It seemed the perfect thing to do, and I could pitch it as a follow-up to Cut Copy Remix. And also a lot of the things that Birmingham museums have been were doing last year while we were closed were around creativity and well-being. We were trying to think what we could do to help people through this difficult time. So this idea of the power of play was quite persuasive. We started off quite small. We only gave them 200 images, but they were 200 of our most well-known images. I thought, if we're going to do this, let's do it properly, you know. And the metadata question was actually a little bit more difficult than I expected. I mean, they take it seriously, you know, they want all the proper dimensions and they want as much information as you can give them. And I found that quite interesting, that in this world of great creativity, which is fantastic, but they also want those, what would you call them, the museum building blocks, you know, the core museum building blocks. So yeah, Yarden asked me whether I wanted a Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, a BMAG within the game. I mean, who would say no to that? So yeah, so I was like, yes. And then he asked me whether I wanted it to look like our current museum and art gallery. And I thought, you know what, wouldn't it be nice if it didn't, you know, if we weren't this Victorian art gallery stuck in the middle of Birmingham, you know, so what can you come up with? So that's how we ended up with BMAG by the Sea, which I was very keen on. Being in landlocked Birmingham, I was very keen on being surrounded by the sea, and it's got this lovely roof terrace, which you know, it's never going to happen in Birmingham, is it? You know, so I quite love the thought of going up there on a sunny day. It's quite, I think it's you know, obviously it's not the real world. We don't have to worry about the environment. We don't have to worry about the sun or the rain. But it's funny, when I did share these images and the videos on social media, I did have one person who said, "Oh, it's awful! Look at all the light that's getting on these artworks. This is terrible." And I had to assure him that, you know, as a digital game, it really didn't matter, that no digital artworks were like harmed in the you know, in the course of making this game, that they were perfectly fine. So it's quite funny that this BMAG that was created for us in many ways is quite traditional. I'll show you some ones afterwards where that kind of changed, but yeah, it was exciting. There was quite a lot of interest for the museum sector in this when we launched it. I can't remember whether it was December or January, but initially people didn't quite understand the game. They thought it was because a lot of people, including ourselves, created virtual galleries, so they thought it was just another way to look like around a Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery, and they just focused on the building. Maybe creating the building had caused that confusion, but the whole point is you can take our artworks and you can like put them anywhere. You build your own art gallery. You can take what you like. They don't have to, you know, it's not, you don't have to fill them full of Birmingham Museum's artworks. You can put them next to artworks from anywhere, you know, any other museum or any other artist that you like. So you create what you want to, you know, it's all down to you. But as I said, I think initially people didn't quite understand that. There was a great response from the Occupy White Walls community, though. It was, like I said, incredibly welcoming. Yeah, and some things that I didn't expect at all. Some people started to create their own BMAGs, which so suddenly there was several BMAGs within the game, which yeah, that wasn't what I expected, but I absolutely loved it. The artworks, I believe, feature in about 7,500 museums have been created in the game now, so I think that's pretty exciting. It's a very engaged audience. There's lots of comments and sharing. A few people have asked whether our traditional like museum audience, BMAG audience, are taking part in this game. Well, it's kind of difficult to tell unless people tell us, and some people have told us. So I know that in some cases that is happening. but it's not really what we did it for. As I said, that's an established community, and who perhaps finding out about Birmingham museums for the first time, seeing these artworks for the first time. We're reaching new people, so I'm not worried too much about whether our traditional audience are playing it or not. And people are obviously who were playing it, obviously having a lot of fun. And yeah, and there's you can see all of the artworks on it's called Cultura, so all of the artworks are actually in the game. You can actually also see separately, and for us that's great because we can dip in and we can see who's using our artworks, what people are saying about them, so it's quite nice to have those sort of stats available. So yeah, obviously as people, you know, some people, not everybody is going to get to this stage, but some people become incredibly good at what they do in the game. These ones which are using Birmingham Museum and Art Gallery images, these first three I'm going to show you are shown by created by Rosa Francesca. So yeah, I really love them. Like any game, you improve, you level up as you begin to play. But also I really like the fact that this game encourages you to tip other people, you know, so it's not actual money, I guess it's more like points, but you know, as you accumulate more, it means you can buy more artworks or buy more building blocks. So I quite love the fact that this game is kind of like powered in some way by people's generosity, you know. So if you really love something, let them tip them, and then they can do more. So yeah, moving quite far away from typical museum and art gallery with some of these ones. And there we have the Star of Bethlehem again. So yeah, people have really got to grips, I feel, with the game now. I mean, maybe in fact they're jumping too much the other way, because I'm not sure we're actually democratizing art, but we are making art available to you know, as many people as we can, and that's obviously a terrific outcome. One of the things I think is worth saying about this game is that it's alive. It's, you know, it's developing all of the time. You know, if we'd created a game ourselves, which, as I said, we never intended to do anyway, but if we had, you know, it would have been the typical thing where we had a project, a limited amount of money and time to do it, and at the end it would have been finished probably, and we wouldn't have been able to do much more with it. Whereas this, it's not ours. It's very much powered by the community. It's continuing to develop. The artificial intelligence Daisy keeps suggesting new art to you, so you can't really stagnate. There's got new features in it now. You can stream music within your art gallery, which is quite nice. Some people are creating art within the game. So more recently, people have started to create murals using some of the building block, and that's become more and more popular. So as well as the art that, you know, actual artworks that you put in the game, people are creating art within the game using building blocks, which, you know, I think is fantastic. And recently I saw an example of somebody creating a game within the game, which I thought that was really clever, and that was a labyrinth within the game. Yeah, and there's time limited exclusive exhibitions, and you know, there's just always things going on. So I really love the fact that we're now part of that community. And I just thought I'd quickly say something about why I think people enjoy this game. You know, well, one, you are learning within the game. As I said, when you go, nobody goes in that game and can build like an amazing art gallery. You've got to learn your way around it. You've got to learn how to build, and then you can get better and better. So it's that idea of learning and improving. If you're interested in art, you're learning about art all of the time. You know, you're discovering new art and artists. You can go to other people's art galleries. You can be finding out more. And there's that incentive, the fact that it is incentivized, that you know, you can get these tips for doing well. You know, it's just generally a fun thing where people can really express their creativity. And that's really me over. That's it. That's the end for me. I just put these links here to show you where you can find out more about Occupy White Walls. I definitely go off and look at their videos as well if you want a sense of it before you jump into the game. And yeah, and they're worth following on Twitter because they share a lot of their new features on there.
That is perfect. Thank you so much for that, Linda. As someone who grew up in Birmingham, seeing BMAG by the sea is a very entertaining sight. I'm going to trot out my well-worn catchphrase now, which is, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat with your name and organisation, and we'll go through those at the end. But now I will hand over to Giulia, who's discussing an equally fun project that she worked on at British Library.
Thank you, David. And thank you, Linda. It was really great to hear about your project. Let me just share my screen. Fingers crossed this will work. Yeah, so hopefully everyone can see this. Hello, everyone. My name is Giulia Carla Rossi, and I work at the British Library as curator for digital publications, where I'm responsible for the emerging formats collection. And I'm here today to talk about the British Library Simulator, which is a mini game that I created last year during the first UK lockdown, and also how playful interactive digital works helped us engage with our audiences even during a global pandemic. So I thought it would be useful to give a bit of background information about our work on emerging formats and what the reasoning behind the simulator was and why it works for us. So the British Library is the National Library of the UK, as you might be aware. It's also a legal deposit library, which means we receive a copy of everything that is published in the UK. And in 2013, digital legal deposit came into effect, allowing the British Library and the other UK legal deposit libraries to collect publications in digital formats alongside print. And these publications are really varied, both in terms of their structure and format type, as well as their content. And you can see a few examples listed at the bottom of the slide. But among these kind of more established formats, we have also been considering how to manage digital publications that are less standardized and also tend to be more structurally and technically complex than what we currently are collecting at scale. So in 2017, we set up the Emerging Formats project together with the other 5 UK legal deposit libraries as a sort of collaborative effort to investigate requirements for collection, preservation, discovery, and access for complex digital publications. And these publications often have strong hardware and software dependencies and are also at risk of rapid obsolescence, which adds an extra level of difficulty to our task. We chose 2 format types to start with. The first one was literary apps, which are basically books published as apps. And the second one was online interactive narratives. And in this talk, I'll be focusing more on online interactive narratives, as the British Library Simulator is an example of one. So they are basically web-based interactive stories where the reader is asked to make choices in order for the narrative to unfold. And these choices could be like clicking on hyperlinks or typing in commands or interacting with the story in some other way. So we built a collection of web-based interactive narratives using already established UK web archive tools and frameworks. So the first one was with the help of Linda Clark, who was our postdoctoral innovation placement for interactive fiction. And she created an interactive narratives collection, which is part of the wider e-publishing trends emerging formats collection on the UK Web Archive. And the narratives included there have a mix of text and sound and video elements, and also present different types of interactions. And this year, we also launched the New Media Writing Prize collection. And the New Media Writing Prize is an annual award organized by Bournemouth University that celebrates innovative and interactive digital works. So collaborating with Bournemouth University, we created a collection to archive all entries that were shortlisted or won since the prize was launched in 2010. And this sort of brings us to the British Library Simulator. The British Library Simulator is a mini game that I created and published last year in May. while working from home during the first UK lockdown. And it was made using Bitsy Game Maker, which is a free online game engine. It was developed by Adam Ledoux. And it's a kind of game engine that lends itself quite well to the creation of short vignette games. It's web-based, so it can be played in browser without the need for download. And I made it freely available online through my itch webpage, which is linked at the bottom of the slide. And in the game, players use an avatar to move around a virtual and very much reduced version of the British Library building in St Pancras, while interacting with other characters that represent readers or members of staff, and at the same time learning facts about the library and making their way slowly towards the reading room. So one of the main reasons why I wanted to create the British Library Simulator was to raise awareness about our emerging formats work by creating an example of the interactive narratives that we are interested in collecting. Although the interactive narratives that we have in our collection are made using a variety of different tools, Bitsy does appear quite frequently as a favorite option for creating sort of slice of life interactive stories. And my hope was that by playing this game, our audience could get a sense of how digital storytelling works, as well as a better insight into the variety of formats that we have or want to add to our collections. Another reason I had for creating the British Library Simulator was that I wanted to find sort of a fun way to disseminate information about the digital resources that the library offers, which continue to be available even during the whole lockdown period. So the British Library's social media accounts were already using hashtags like Let's Get Digital and hashtag BL is open to help users find the resources they needed while the physical library buildings were closed. So I sort of inserted the simulator into this conversation on Twitter to boost its reach. Also including links to specific pages into the game and also on the game webpage as well helped with directing our audiences to services and collections they might be interested in. And I should probably say that what I've included in the game are just a very small sample of resources. There are a lot more projects and collections and services offered by the library, but I just focus on a few digital offers that I was aware of from my department of contemporary British publications. I also included like little facts about the library and the St Pancras building in the game for players to discover while they were wandering around the virtual rooms, as well as some of the projects that the library staff have been working on during the pandemic. So not just the Emerging Formats project, but the British Library Sound Archive as well, and the UK Web Archive too. And my intention was to raise awareness not just of what we are doing, but of how the public can contribute and help us shape our collections as well. So the UK Web Archive, for example, has a nomination form that anyone can fill in and submit to help us save as much of the UK web as possible, which also includes interactive narratives and other web-based emerging media. And the gameplay in the game is quite limited. So you can wander around a small number of rooms and the game ends when you manage to access the reading room. But this was kind of a deliberate choice, as I was hoping that this might make the game more appealing to a wider audience and one that didn't necessarily see themselves as gamers. And I also like the pixel art aesthetic and the kind of retro vibe of the medium, and thought it would be a great way to present the British Library from a kind of fun perspective. And the pixelated version of the British Library in the game is much smaller and in no way comparable to the real thing. But that was sort of the point. Kind of wanted to awaken sort of nostalgia for the library building and for a type of cultural experience, or even mundane experience like strolling through the library public spaces and buying a coffee, which we might have taken for granted before the pandemic and lockdowns, but seemed very much out of reach last summer. And I've included here some analytics about the game that I've taken directly from itch. So to date, the game has been viewed over 6,000 times and played over 3,000 times. And the graph shows the number of views per week from the month of the launch, so May last year to the end of 2020. It doesn't look very interesting, but you can see the highest number of views per week was the week of the launch and the following week, which both had 1,250 views each. And then there is another little spike of 165 views in December in the week of the British Library Labs Awards, when the simulator won the 2020 Staff Award. But in general, the peaks kind of coincide with the British Library Simulator being picked up by different publications and blog posts and articles, which directed the traffic back onto the itch webpage. I also wanted to include a few of the comments that players left on the page, because it was really nice to see users enjoying the game. And it was also interesting to get a better idea about what people took from the experience, whether it was learning something new about the library, having a fun kind of relaxing break, or using it as a sort of virtual tour to explore places that had become physically inaccessible due to the pandemic. I wanted to include faint signals as well, which is another example of a creative response to our collection that was created during the pandemic. So Faint Signals is a commissioned digital art piece created by Yorkshire-based studio Invisible Flock that makes use of our sound collection and combines it with a textual narrative and a computer-generated landscape the user can explore using their keyboard. And it uses sound from wildlife, weather, nature to kind of represent the diversity and complexity of Yorkshire woodland. And it also reflects on our relationship with the natural world, but using the means of a digital medium, which I thought was quite interesting. And finally, I wanted to touch on the impact that the British Library Simulator has had on other activities at the library and on other kind of playful digital ways to continuously engage with our audiences. So my colleague Stella Wisdom has organized a few game jams throughout the years that encourage people to use materials from our collection. And the latest one was the Games in the Woods Game Jam, which was part of this year's Urban Tree Festival. And as part of the game of the Jam's launch, they ran an online event to inspire participants and highlight free digital resources which can be used to create a game, including visual, audio, and other online game making tools. Last year as well, I helped deliver a digital scholarship workshop for staff at the British Library on creative game using Bitsy. And the Hidden World of Qatar National Library, which you can see a screenshot in the bottom left corner, was one of the works inspired by it. So it's based on the Qatar National Library in Doha and mentions real objects in the British Library Qatar collections to sort of encourage people to further browse our collections. And it's really good. And then, as I briefly mentioned before, the British Library Simulator won the Staff Award at the 2020 British Library Labs Symposium last year, which is an event that kind of aims to celebrate innovative uses of the British Library digital and digitized collections for research, creative, academic, educational purposes. And it was really great to see this little project recognized among so many other great projects, and also seeing firsthand the impact that we had on people. And yeah, I think that's all from me. Thank you very much for listening. And I've included here my contact details if you'd like to continue the discussion. And I'd be very happy to answer any questions you might have. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Giulia. Dave has momentarily lost view of this talk. I think he can hear us, but he can't see us. So, so therefore he can't read the chat or the questions. But if anyone would like to put a question into the chat,
Please also just add your name or at least where you work so that we can kind of field those questions. But we do have one here already, and it's from Stuart, who is Digital Learning Officer at Chester Zoo. And he says that he would be interested to know, I think this is actually for Linda, he'd be interested to know which digital asset management system Birmingham galleries and museums use and what the best and worst things are about it. You'll need to unmute though. Sorry, there we go.
Yeah, we use Asset Bank, which is made by Bright Interactive, and it's really very good because it's so intuitive. You know, it's really easy to use. You know, when people come to there's minimal training involved really, and you can always see the horror of people when they think they have to be trained, and then when they go, is that it really? So I would say yes, it's great, it's really good. I'm trying to think of I can't really think of any negatives around it. I think the thing to realize though is to do it well, you know, you have to keyword, you have to have all the information in there, you know, so people can find the things in there. So yeah, you need that sort of a process, and you need somebody who knows what they're doing, or to be trained to just realize that it's not enough to put images on there. It's you know, you have to be really hot on how you describe things, so you enable people to find things. But yeah, I love it. As you can tell.
That's great, thank you. And I have a question here from Chloe, who's Digital Engagement Bank of England Museum. And she says, what do each of the speakers see as the pros and cons of creating / commissioning a game in-house versus joining with one which is already created, such as the one that you spoke about, Linda? So I don't know who wants to go first, but Linda, you're on the screen at the moment.
Yeah, I mean, we couldn't have done it in-house, so we didn't have the skills or resources to do that. So for us, this opened up something, and as I said, we couldn't have if we had the money to do it. You know, if you're starting from scratch, it's still quite difficult, isn't it? You know, to try and get something right, all the kind of prototyping that goes with that, the testing. Obviously, I'm not saying you can't end up with something that's really good, but for us, jumping straight into something that was already at a mature stage and had an audience was great. I guess, like I said, if you've developed a game yourself, I guess you can think about what you want people to get from it. You know, you can make it more bespoke. But in this situation, obviously, as I said, we never meant to get involved with a game, so that wasn't our concern.
Giulia, do you have a view on that?
Yeah, I mean, like in the case of the British Library Simulator, yeah, I was able to make that because Bitsy is quite a friendly game engine tool, and doesn't really require people to know how to code. So I kind of learned it by myself. And really, I think it was also possible because of the pandemic, because I did have a bit more free time, at least at the beginning of the lockdown, not anymore. But that kind of gave me the possibility of experimenting a bit and trying and doing, like, yeah, a bit of trial and error. But it's obviously much more smaller scale than Linda's project, which is also why I was able to kind of do it just by myself. But yeah, it was good. It was a good experience. It was good to kind of be able to have that much control over it as well, decide what to include and like the angle that I wanted to kind of approach it from. But obviously it is like the kind of resources that we had, the time that I could dedicate to it were a bit more restricted, I guess, than if we were able to join something that someone else had already created. But yeah, I guess they serve kind of different purposes in that.
Yeah. I gather that Dave is back in the room, as it were. So
yeah, I am. It wouldn't be a Zoom call without a little technical glitch, would it? So I'm sorry about that. Have we gone through all the questions in the chat? Is that right? I have a couple of things that I would ask if Linda and Giulia don't mind. Linda, I remember when I first covered the BMAG's decision to do the partnership with Occupy White Walls, there was a quote from Yarden at Sticky Pixels which said that it would be an opportunity for people who'd maybe never heard of your collection, or maybe never even heard of Birmingham, to get involved and engage with the artworks. Is the end goal just to sort of raise awareness, or are you sort of hoping that it will? I know obviously BMAG is closed at the minute, but is the real goal to sort of get people through the doors when that's possible?
No, it really is just to raise awareness, you know. I know some people have said when it's possible they will come to BMAG. Whether they ever will, whether they're just saying that to me, I don't know. But it really fits in with that kind of open access idea that these images should be available to everybody. You know, that people should be able to see them and use them, and yeah, I guess that's it. Just really, I mean, people are going to be discovering. I mean, people discovering paraphyllite artworks for the first time, or if you hate paraphyllite, something else, you know. I think it's fantastic to think of all of these works that maybe previously on a BMAG wall or in store. You know what museums, can't show everything. So often these things are in store for a long time. It's fantastic to think of them alive and on these walls, these virtual walls scattered around the world.
So obviously both of you worked on these projects during the pandemic, and do you think this is sort of maybe a new era for museums, in that there will be a different stream of content and things that purely is for digital? Like if you say a lot of people probably won't necessarily head from Ukraine to Birmingham to see the pre-Raphaelites, they'll probably look on their computer. Do you think this is now the future, that after the experience of the pandemic, there will be a strong digital presence with no emphasis on bringing people in? It will just be, that's what museums do, and libraries as well. Giulia?
Yeah, well, I mean, I do hope that there'll be more resources allocated to digital projects and digital creative pieces as well. And yeah, it kind of feels like a lot more cultural heritage institutions have started considering, okay, we need to kind of enhance our digital presence in some way. I don't think that's going to replace like in-person experiences in any way. And I think people are quite keen on being able to go back to have like in-person events and be able to go back to libraries and museums as well. But yeah, I definitely hope they'll be able to kind of live side by side and have both like digital content as well as maybe more in-person experiences.
Perfect. Linda, did you have anything to add? Or?
Yeah, it's not going to go away now, is it? You know what I mean? We've discovered a new way of being, really. And obviously, like everybody else, I enjoy the kind of physical experience, the visit. That's always going to be really special. But I think what this has shown is that how many more people you can reach, around the country, around the world by doing this. And I think there was an idea that some perhaps museums, arts organizations have had in the past, that in some way your digital audience wasn't your real audience, that it was always about marketing and just trying to get people in. And that period of closure woke people up to the fact that no, actually, this is a real audience, this really counts. And I'm sure that thinking now won't go away. People will realize that they're an audience in themselves, and when we're reaching thousands of people all over the world, that's an accomplishment.
Perfect. Unless anyone else who's watching has another question, and please, if you do, just pop it in the chat. If you don't know, we'll probably bring this to a close. I think we're getting near the end of our hour, and with our back-to-back program today, it will give me and Anna a chance to get a sandwich or something, which is greatly appreciated. But as I think I mentioned earlier, this session has been recorded, and so in a couple of weeks it will be uploaded. I know plenty of people have booked to view it after the fact, but anyone who wants to watch it back can. And I'd just like to say a big thank you to Linda and Giulia for their really interesting talks and for giving up their time. It's greatly appreciated. And yeah, thank you very much for joining us. And I don't think we've got any questions at this point, so we'll call it a day, I think. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.